Dragons attack the village. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the hills when the village of Eldenbrook glowed gold under its fading light. Children chased one another through the dusty streets, their laughter mixing with the clang of blacksmiths and the chatter of market stalls. To anyone passing by, Eldenbrook looked like the most peaceful place in the world, a pocket of safety tucked away between forest and river. Yet peace has a fragile heart, and on this evening, it was destined to shatter. High above the clouds, unseen by those below, shadows stirred. The beating of colossal wings rippled through the sky like a storm waiting to break. The wind changed, carrying a sharp scent of sulfur. Farmers in their fields looked up, shielding their eyes, but saw nothing, only the last rays of light fading. Still, something in their bones whispered a warning. In the village square, the old storyteller, Mireen, was spinning one of his legendary tales by the fire pit. The children sat cross-legged, their eyes wide as he spoke of dragons, their scales like iron, their eyes burning as if filled with the sun itself. Dragons, he said, his voice dropping low, are not the stuff of bedtime stories. They are hunger and fire given wings. The children gasped, half delighted, half fearful. Their parents chuckled, thinking it only a tale. But as Mireen's words left his lips, a deafening roar cracked the sky. It was not thunder. It was not storm. It was something far worse. A shadow fell over Eldenbrook. The villagers turned their eyes upward, and there they saw it. A dragon, vast as the hill itself, wings stretched like black sails against the dying sun. Its roar shook the very earth, scattering birds and silencing every voice. Then, with a breath that glowed like molten gold, it unleashed fire upon the edge of the village. The attack had begun. The first blast of fire consumed the granary, turning months of stored wheat into a roaring inferno. Flames climbed skyward, painting the dusk with a violent glow. Villagers screamed as they scattered, some clutching children, others frozen in shock. The peace of Eldenbrook cracked like glass under hammer, and fear ran through every street. Water! Get the water buckets, someone cried, but the words were drowned in the crackling roar of fire and the beating of wings. The dragon swept low over the rooftops, its massive shadow engulfing entire homes. Roofs collapsed under its claws, timbers snapping like brittle bones. A shower of sparks and ash rained upon the market stalls, and the smell of burning thatch spread through the air like poison. By the river, a group of young men tried forming a bucket line, but the heat was unbearable. One by one, they dropped their pails and fled as the dragon wheeled around for another pass. Its eyes glowed like molten amber, unblinking and merciless, scanning for movement below. Every heartbeat was followed by a new terror. In the square, Mireen the storyteller tried to gather the children. "Stay close. Do not scatter," he urged, his old voice shaking but steady with urgency. The children clung to him, their earlier delight now replaced by tears and sobs. One little boy whimpered, "Is it the dragon from your story?" Mireen could not answer. Then the beast roared again, a sound that rattled windows and made even the bravest clutch their ears. A second blast of fire spewed forth, this time striking the blacksmith's forge. The explosion of heat flung sparks across the cobbled streets, igniting hay bales and wooden carts. Horses screamed in panic, tearing at their reins, bolting wildly into the chaos. Not all froze. The village guards, though few in number, raised their spears and bows. "Aim for the eyes," shouted Captain Roran, his voice hoarse with smoke. Arrows flew, dark against the fiery glow, but most shattered harmlessly against the dragon's iron-hard scales. One struck beneath a wing joint, and the beast shrieked, the sound like tearing metal. For a moment, hope flickered in the villagers' hearts. But fury is swifter than hope. The dragon's massive tail lashed through the square, smashing a fountain into rubble and hurling men like rag dolls. The ground quaked as stones cracked beneath its weight. Captain Roran staggered to his feet, blood streaming from his forehead, but he would not yield. He planted his spear, shouting, "For Eldenbrook," as the beast turned upon him with fire boiling in its throat. The villagers could do nothing but watch in horror, the night filling with flames, screams, and the relentless thunder of wings. The dragon's fire roared out, a torrent of molten heat, engulfing the fountain where Captain Roran stood. For an instant, the flames blazed so bright it seemed as if the world itself was breaking apart. Villagers shielded their eyes, expecting to see nothing left but ash. But when the fire died down, a figure still stood. Roran, though scorched and bleeding, had thrown himself behind the cracked stone base of the fountain at the last moment. His spear glowed red from the heat, but his hand held fast. He staggered forward, coughing, his voice raw. "Hold the line. Do not give in." His defiance sparked others. Young Alric, the blacksmith's apprentice, seized a fallen spear and ran toward the square, his face pale, but his grip steady. He had no armor, only a leather apron, yet something burned brighter in him than fear. "We can fight it," he shouted, raising the weapon high. Others joined him, farmers with pitchforks, hunters with bows, even elders with nothing more than axes or hammers. The dragon wheeled overhead, banking sharply, its wings sending cyclones of dust and ash through the streets. Its massive eye locked onto the gathering crowd. With a shriek that split the heavens, it dove again. "Shields up!" Roran bellowed. The few guards with shields raised them, though they looked like toys compared to the beast. The dragon's claws struck the ground like thunderbolts, shattering cobblestones. Its maw opened wide, rows of teeth glinting like blades. And then, from the shadows of a burning house, an arrow hissed through the air. It struck just beneath the dragon's eye, a narrow gap in its armored face. The creature recoiled with a deafening roar of pain. All turned to see who had loosed it. Standing atop the roof of the smithy, her cloak singed and her bow trembling in her hands, was Lyra, the hunter's daughter. Her braid was tangled, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes were fierce, unyielding. She nocked another arrow and shouted, "Aim for the soft spots. The joints, the eyes, the throat." The villagers followed her lead. Arrows, stones, and even pots of boiling water were hurled skyward. The dragon thrashed, snapping its tail and scattering fighters like dry leaves. Yet every strike was met with resistance, now, not surrender. Still, hope was fragile. For every arrow that found its mark, a dozen bounced harmlessly off. Fire swept through the eastern quarter, reducing whole rows of houses to ash. The wails of the trapped echoed through the smoke. Children cried out for parents who could not reach them. Lyra's arrows slowed the dragon, but did not stop it. Alric's spear snapped against its scales. Roran, barely standing, continued to rally the few who still fought. Eldenbrook had never faced such a nightmare, and the weight of despair pressed on every soul. And then, as if to remind them of their smallness, the dragon rose higher, beating its wings once, twice. The gust of wind toppled stalls and hurled men off their feet. The beast opened its maw again, not just fire this time, but a roar so powerful it seemed to shatter the very air. The sound drove people to their knees, hands clapped over bleeding ears. This was no simple raid. This was annihilation. The dragon circled high above Eldenbrook, its vast wings blotting out stars as night fully descended. Below, the once bustling village was now a sea of smoke and fire. Every crackle of burning timber, every scream of the wounded, seemed to echo endlessly through the valley. Roran leaned against the charred remains of a wagon, his chest heaving, his spear barely intact. Blood ran down his arm, but his eyes never left the sky. "It's regrouping," he rasped, forcing his voice loud enough to carry. "Brace yourselves. It's not finished." Lyra dropped from the roof, where she had been firing arrows. She landed hard, rolling to her knees, her bow still clutched tight. Alric rushed to her side, his face streaked with soot. "We can't hold much longer," he said, his voice breaking. "Half the village is gone, and the wells are nearly dry." Lyra's gaze flicked to the inferno around them, the homes of neighbors, the lives built stone by stone, now reduced to rubble. Her jaw tightened. "Then we make the dragon bleed until it leaves us no choice." But as she spoke, Miriam the storyteller emerged from the haze, leaning on a carved staff. The children clustered close behind him. His eyes, clouded with age yet sharp with memory, locked on the shadow above. "This is no wild beast," he said grimly. "Dragons do not strike without reason. Something or someone has driven it here." Alric frowned. "What do you mean?" "Dragons vanished generations ago." Miriam's voice trembled. "Vanished?"
No.
They slept, bound to their mountains and deep caverns. The stories were not lies but warnings. When dragons rise, it means the balance of the world has been broken. Before Alric could reply, the dragon descended again, this time slower, more deliberate, as if savoring the chaos below. Its molten eyes glowed brighter, and a strange sound accompanied its breath, not just fire but a rumbling chant, like an echo of language lost to time. Miriam's face went pale. "It's calling," the old man whispered. "Calling others." The words struck harder than any claw or flame. The villagers froze in horror, realizing that the nightmare might only be beginning. With another earth-shaking roar, the dragon unleashed its second wave of destruction. Fire poured across the riverbank, boiling the water, killing the fish that had sustained Eldenbrook for generations. The bridge collapsed in an explosion of ash and steam, cutting off escape to the west. "Archers!" Roran bellowed, forcing his battered body to move. Lyra loosed arrow after arrow, each one aimed with desperate precision. One shaft struck beneath the creature's jaw, and black blood spattered the stones. The dragon reeled back, its scream piercing the night like lightning across bone. The villagers roared in answer, rallying, striking, fighting as though possessed by the will to survive. Alric drove a jagged spear toward its wing joint. Farmers hurled iron hooks and chains. Mothers armed with kitchen blades fought alongside sons with hunting knives. Yet the dragon's fury was endless. With a sweep of its tail, it toppled an entire row of houses. With a single gout of flame, it silenced the cries of those too slow to flee. The air grew thick with smoke, the ground slick with blood and ash. Miriam raised his staff high, shouting words in an ancient tongue no one else knew. For a moment, the dragon faltered, its fire sputtering as though the sound unsettled it. Lyra glanced at him sharply. "What are you doing?" Remembering, Miriam gasped, his voice hoarse. "The old language, the tongue that bound dragons once. But my memory, it is broken. I cannot hold it for long." The dragon snarled, as though recognizing his attempt, and turned its burning gaze upon him. The children clutched his robe in terror. Lyra and Alric exchanged a look, fear and determination mirrored in their eyes. They both knew the truth. If Miriam fell, their last chance at understanding this terror would be lost. And above, high in the dark sky, another echo answered the dragon's call. A second roar. Distant, yet growing nearer. Eldenbrook's nightmare was far from over. The echoing roar rolled through the valley like thunder, carrying with it a promise of devastation. Heads snapped skyward, and in the smoke-blurred heavens, wings unfolded, vast, leathery, and crimson as burning coals. A second dragon. The villagers' cries rose in panic, some dropping weapons, others collapsing where they stood. Even the bravest felt their strength falter, for one dragon was more than myth made flesh. Two was doom incarnate. Eldenbrook was no longer under attack. It was being erased. Roran clenched his jaw, blood dripping from a cut on his cheek, and shouted over the chaos. "Stand your ground. If we break, we die. Hold." His voice, ragged and desperate, cut through the fear like steel on stone. The second dragon swept low, its scales gleaming crimson in the firelight, its breath scattering sparks before unleashing a cone of blistering flame across the northern wall. Stone cracked, timber split, and the village's defenses crumbled in moments. The first dragon shrieked in triumph, circling to join its kin. Miriam, clutching his staff, staggered forward with the children still behind him. His old voice quivered as he murmured, "Two, just as the prophecies said. Where fire comes in twain, darkness follows thrice." Lyra, wiping ash from her eyes, glared at him. "What are you saying? That there will be more?" The old man did not answer, but the sorrow in his eyes was louder than words. The villagers scrambled to regroup. Alric, panting heavily, dragged a wounded boy from the ruins of a burning house and shoved him towards safety. His own arms shook, the weight of exhaustion dragging him down, but his spirit burned hotter than fear. "We can't give in," he growled, almost to himself. "We can't." Lyra loosed another arrow, this time striking the crimson dragon's mouth just as it opened to release fire. The arrow vanished in flame, but the beast recoiled, choking briefly, smoke billowing from its throat. For a fleeting moment, a cheer rose from the survivors. But the reprieve was short-lived. The two dragons rose together, circling in tandem, their roars harmonizing into a terrible chorus. Flames rained from both sides, hemming the villagers in, cutting off escape routes. The square became a cage of fire. Panic surged. Mothers clutched children, old men wept, and the bucket lines collapsed entirely. "We're finished," someone screamed. "We cannot fight them both." Roran slammed the butt of his spear into the stones, his voice ragged but unyielding. "If we burn, let it be as warriors. Fight for your homes, for your families, for Eldenbrook." The words ignited something in those who still stood. Farmers raised their scythes, hunters gripped their bows, and even the wounded crawled forward to join the defense. The villagers, ordinary folk with no training in war, became a wall of defiance in the face of impossible odds. The dragons swooped low, claws tearing through rooftops, fire scorching the ground. The air was a storm of ash, the night alive with firelight. Lyra and Alric fought side by side, her arrows darting like silver streaks, his broken spear stabbing again and again at scales that refused to yield. Still, for every small wound they inflicted, the dragons answered with devastation. A third of the village was gone. The river boiled. The bridge lay in ruins. And every cry of resistance was matched by another cry of loss. Then Mirian stumbled into the square, raising his staff high, his voice breaking into the ancient tongue once more. The sound was not mere words, it was command. The dragons faltered mid-flight, their wings shuddering, their fire sputtering. The villagers stared in shock as the monsters roared, not in triumph this time, but in fury, their eyes burning with recognition. "By the old tongue," Mirian wheezed, collapsing to his knees. "They can be bound. But the words, they are fading from me." The dragons turned their wrath on him instantly, as if they knew his voice was the greatest threat of all. They dove together, twin streaks of shadow and fire aimed directly for the old man. And in that instant, Lyra and Alric leapt forward, not away from the danger, but toward it. The two dragons dove with murder in their eyes, fire boiling in their throats. Mirian knelt in the square, frail hands gripping his carved staff, whispering broken fragments of the ancient tongue. His voice cracked, but the words carried power, enough to make the dragons hesitate, enough to make them furious. "Get him out of here," Roran bellowed, stumbling forward despite the blood soaking his armor. But Mirian did not move. His eyes, bright with a fire not his own, stared upward, as if the heavens themselves demanded his defiance. Lyra and Alric rushed ahead, placing themselves between the old man and death. Lyra loosed arrow after arrow, her arms trembling with exhaustion. One arrow buried itself deep into the crimson dragon's mouth. Another skidded across the black dragon's eye ridge, making it blink and veer off course. Alric lunged with a jagged spear, thrusting upward into the joint of a wing. The weapon snapped, but the strike drew blood, thick, black, and sizzling where it fell. The dragon screamed in pain and rage, but their dive did not falter. Then, with a roar of defiance, the villagers surged as one. Farmers, hunters, and smiths hurled everything they had, stones, spears, axes, even burning timbers from ruined homes. The air became a storm of desperate projectiles. One hunter's arrow sank deep into a dragon's neck. A blacksmith flung a chain that tangled briefly around a talon. Even children, too young to flee, pelted the beasts with rocks. For the first time that night, Eldenbrook did not cower, it resisted. The dragons shrieked, pulling upward at the last moment, their talons grazing the square instead of crushing it. Mirine's staff glowed faintly in the firelight as he forced more words from his throat, his voice thin but commanding. The beasts faltered mid-flight, wings thrashing wildly. "It works," Alric shouted, eyes wide. The old words weakened them. Myrine gasped, nearly collapsing, but Lyra caught his arm. "Then teach us. Tell us the words." But the old man only shook his head, coughing violently. "It takes more than a voice." Blood of oathed memory of fire, his eyes locked on hers, heavy with meaning. "You must become the word, not speak it." The ground shook as the black dragon landed with a thunderous crash, claws tearing through the cobblestones. Its gaze fixed on Myrine, hatred blazing in its eyes. The crimson dragon wheeled above, circling like a vulture ready to strike again. "Hold the line," Roran cried, his voice breaking as he dragged himself upright. His shield arm hung useless, shattered by fire, yet he raised his spear with his remaining strength. Around him, villagers formed a ragged ring around Myrine, men, women, even the wounded, standing shoulder to shoulder, with weapons trembling but raised. The black dragon roared and charged. The villagers roared back. Lyra's arrow struck first, piercing deep into the beast's throat. Alric leapt forward with nothing but a broken spear shaft, jamming it into the wound. The dragon shrieked, its claws tearing the earth. Roran drove his spear into its chest, though the weapon splintered like glass. And then Myrine raised his staff once more, his voice ringing louder than before, filled with both sorrow and strength. The ancient words cracked like thunder across the square. The dragon reared back, its fire sputtering to embers. Its wings faltered. For a heartbeat, the great beast seemed weakened, vulnerable. "Now!" Myrine cried, his voice breaking. "Strike now while it falters." The villagers surged with everything they had left: arrows, spears, stones, fire. The black dragon screamed as blood poured from its wounds, staggering backward. For the first time, the unkillable nightmare bled like any creature of flesh. The crimson dragon shrieked in answer, swooping down to shield its kin. Fire rained once more, scattering the defenders. Myrine collapsed, the glow fading from his staff, his body spent. Lyra fell to her knees beside him, clutching his hand. His lips moved with one last whisper. "It is not one battle, it is a war. And you are chosen." His hand went limp. The dragons roared in unison, fire blazing brighter than ever, as the villagers realized they had lost their guide. And yet, in Myrine's death, something had been left behind, the knowledge that dragons could bleed, could falter, could be fought. Eldenbrook, though scarred, was not broken. Not yet. The night stretched long and merciless. Fire consumed whole streets, reducing once proud homes to ash. The cries of the wounded mixed with the roars of the dragons, creating a chorus of misery that clung to every broken wall. Myrine's lifeless body lay still in the square, his staff charred but faintly glowing with dying embers. Lyra knelt beside him, her heart heavy, her bow trembling in her hands. The old man's last words echoed in her skull. "You are chosen." She wanted to scream, to deny it, but there was no time. The black dragon staggered, wounded but alive, its scales cracked and bleeding. The crimson dragon circled above, shrieking in fury, its flames raining down in relentless waves. The villagers, exhausted, burned, bloodied, fought with dwindling strength. Every breath tasted of ash. Every heartbeat felt borrowed. Roran, battered and half-conscious, leaned heavily on his shattered spear. His voice cracked as he called, "We will not yield. Eldenbrook stands." Yet his words were met with silence. The people no longer had breath for cheers. They only had the will to keep swinging, keep resisting, though their bodies were failing. Alric, sweat and soot streaking his face, pulled Lyra to her feet. "We can't hold much longer," he said, his voice breaking. If the Crimson One joins the fight on the ground, it's over. Lyra gritted her teeth, her eyes burning with defiance. Then we strike before it does. She looked down at Miriam's staff. The wood pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light, as though the words the old man spoke still lingered inside it. Tentatively, she reached for it. The moment her fingers brushed the staff, a surge of fire and memory shot through her. She gasped, nearly dropping it, as visions flooded her mind. Visions of dragons soaring above mountains, of ancient warriors standing defiant, of voices chanting in the old tongue. She heard Miriam's voice among them, whispering, "It is not spoken, it is lived." Her bow slipped from her grasp as the staff grew warm in her hands. Auric stared, eyes wide. "Lyra, what's happening?" I think I can hear them," she whispered, her voice trembling. The words Miriam spoke. "They're inside this." She looked at him, her eyes now glowing faintly in the firelight. "Maybe inside me." Before Auric could answer, the crimson dragon shrieked and dove, fire bursting from its maw. Lyra raised the staff instinctively. The flames struck, but instead of consuming her, the fire split around her in a roaring torrent, scattering harmlessly into the air. The villagers froze, their eyes wide in disbelief. For the first time, the fire had not burned them. For the first time, they saw hope. The black dragon, wounded and enraged, lunged toward her, its claws tearing through the earth. Lyra thrust the staff forward, shouting the first word that came to her mind, not in her own language, but in the old one that had burned itself into her soul. The ground shook. The dragon staggered, its body twisting as though bound by invisible chains. It shrieked, fire spewing wildly as it thrashed in agony. Auric rushed to her side, grabbing a discarded sword. "You've got it," he shouted. "You can bind them like Miriam." Lyra's whole body trembled under the force of it, but she stood tall, the staff blazing brighter in her hands. "No, we can. This isn't mine alone. It's all of us." She turned to the villagers, broken, bleeding, but still standing, and raised the staff high. "Fight with me," she cried. "Eldenbrook is not theirs to take. We are not theirs to burn. Stand with me." Something shifted in the hearts of the people. Farmers tightened their grip on scythes. Children picked up stones. The wounded dragged themselves upright. For the first time, their fear turned into fire. The crimson dragon shrieked, swooping lower, sensing the tide turning. The black dragon strained against the invisible bindings, thrashing furiously. The air filled with the clash of fire, steel, and the unyielding will of those who refused to surrender. And in the center of it all stood Lyra, staff blazing like a star, the chosen flame of Eldenbrook. The war was not over, but the village had found its spark. The crimson dragon swooped lower, its massive body blotting out the stars, fire building in its throat like the birth of a sun. The black dragon tore furiously at the unseen bonds Miriam's words had left behind, shrieking in defiance. The ground shook beneath the weight of their fury, and for a moment it seemed the village would be swallowed whole. Yet in the heart of the square, Lyra stood with Miriam's staff, firelight dancing in her eyes. The villagers gathered around her. Not soldiers, but farmers, smiths, hunters, mothers, and children, each clutching what little weapon they could find. Their fear was still there, but it burned alongside something greater: resolve. "Together," Lyra said, her voice strong though her arms trembled. "Every voice, every hand, every heart. Together we fight, or together we fall." She raised the staff high. The glow brightened, pulsing like a heartbeat. And as if answering her call, the villagers shouted as one. Their voices, ragged but fierce, filled the night. "Eldenbrook! Eldenbrook!" The crimson dragon unleashed its fire. Lyra thrust the staff forward, and the villagers pressed closer, their voices rising louder. The flames met the light of the staff and split apart, curling harmlessly around them like waves breaking against stone. Gasps of wonder turned to cries of triumph. "Now!" Roran bellowed, staggering forward with his broken spear. "Strike them now." Arrows rained upward, Hammers and stones followed. The crimson dragon reeled as shafts pierced the softer flesh between its scales. Auric leapt onto a fallen beam and hurled a sword like a spear, the blade burying deep into the dragon's neck. Black blood spilled, sizzling on the cobblestones. Lyra focused on the black dragon, her voice breaking into the ancient tongue. The words poured from her not as memory, but as fire itself, burning through her veins. The dragon shrieked as the invisible bonds tightened, dragging it down. Its wings faltered. It collapsed onto the square with a thunderous crash, stone shattering beneath its weight. "Now, Lyra," Auric cried. "Finish it." Her arms shook, the staff blazing like molten iron. With a final cry, she slammed it into the earth. The light surged outward, searing into the dragon's wounds. The beast roared, thrashing violently, then fell still, its body collapsing in smoke and ash. The villagers erupted in stunned silence. One dragon slain. But the battle was not done. The crimson dragon shrieked with rage, diving low in a storm of fire and claws. Its fury was unrelenting, its wrath immeasurable. It landed amidst the ruins, scattering villagers like leaves, its tail smashing through walls, its fire consuming the last standing homes. Auric rushed forward, sword in hand, and struck at its leg. The blade barely pierced the scales, but it drew the dragon's eye. The beast roared, raising a claw to crush him. "No!" Lyra screamed. She lifted the staff again, but her strength was nearly gone. The fire of the old tongue burned through her, threatening to consume her as much as the dragon. Then, something remarkable happened. The villagers, all of them, began to shout, not words of fear, but words of power. Fragments of the chant Myrine had taught, phrases carried by memory and instinct. They shouted together, their voices weaving into a chorus of defiance. Farmers, children, smiths, hunters, all speaking the ancient tongue as though the fire had been awakened in every soul. The staff blazed brighter than ever before. Lyra raised it high, tears streaming down her soot-streaked face. "With us," she cried. "With all of us." The ground split with light. The crimson dragon reared back, its wings faltering, its fire sputtering to embers. Its body writhed as chains of light, born not from one voice but from many, wrapped around it. It shrieked, a sound of fury and fear, before the villagers surged forward. Auric drove his sword deep into its throat. Lyra thrust the staff into its chest. And with the final unified cry of Eldenbrook's people, the crimson dragon collapsed, its body unraveling into smoke and flame until nothing remained but silence. The square grew still. Fire crackled on the outskirts, smoke drifted upward, but the roars were gone. The dragons, invincible, eternal, merciless, had fallen. For a long moment no one moved. Then a cheer rose, weak but fierce, from the survivors. "Eldenbrook! Eldenbrook!" The voices grew, louder, stronger, until the night rang not with fear but with triumph. Lyra fell to her knees, the staff slipping from her hand. Auric caught her before she hit the ground, his own body trembling with exhaustion. "You did it," he whispered. "No," she murmured, her eyes heavy but her spirit burning. "We did it." Above them, dawn broke at last, the first light of morning piercing through smoke and ash. The sun rose over Eldenbrook, not the same village as before, but one reborn from fire. And though Myrine was gone, his words lived on in them. It is not one battle, it is a war. The villagers knew now that dragons had awakened. More would come. Eldenbrook would rebuild, but it would never again be just a village. It would be a fortress, a beacon of resistance. Because on that night, in the fire and blood, the people of Eldenbrook learned they were not prey. They were dragon slayers,